FCNYC. My name is Ben Chan, I'm your host, and I've got a lot of boxing to talk to you about because this weekend it's Manny Pacquiao versus Timothy Bradley on HBO pay-per-view. Let's start with the first fight on the televised portion of the card, which is going to be Guillermo Rigondeaux versus Teon Kennedy in a match for the Super Bantamweight Championship. Now, let's talk about the opponent. Teon Kennedy, he's a Philadelphia fighter. He is a technician. He is a textbook fighter. I think his nickname is The Machine. He's a young fighter. He's only 24, 25. He's got about 17, 18 fights under his belt, all of them victories except for one draw. And he's only got a handful of knockouts, I think 7 or 8. And the problem is that he's a technician who is going to be in the ring against a guy who might be the best technician in boxing, Guillermo Rigondeaux. Rigondeaux is a guy from Cuba. He had a long amateur career there before defecting to the United States, and he's a really good fighter. The problem is that he's a technician himself, and being a technician, he usually doesn't go for the knockout, which is why he doesn't have a big fan base. It is at times really laborious to watch Rigondeaux. It is really frustrating to watch him sometimes because it's clear that he's better than the guy that he's in the ring against, but he doesn't go to take the guy out, even though sometimes you feel if he just put on the pressure, if he just threw some more body shots like he's really good at doing, that he could take out his opponent. But he doesn't go for that. He goes rounds, and that's what makes it so frustrating to watch Guillermo Rigondeaux. Now, Teon Kennedy is a guy who hasn't at this point shown a lot of knockout power. He fights as a technician because he has to be a technician. Sometimes he stands in trades even though it's not in his best interest to. In this fight, he's probably not going to stand in trade. Now, I don't know what Rigondeaux is going to do. Well, actually, I suspect that Rigondeaux and Teon Kennedy is going to go 12 rounds. I favor Rigondeaux just because he's got more experience, even though he doesn't have as many pro fights as Teon. He's got a lot of amateur experience, and he's been in the ring more often. Now, I expect it to be a technical fight. I expect it to be 12 rounds of tit for tat, fundamental boxing, which unfortunately might be really boring for people to watch, especially when it becomes clear how good Rigondeaux is, or how much better Rigondeaux is better than Kennedy. Now, I hope Rigondeaux turns into a guy who does the crowd-pleasing things. I hope that he puts his punches together. I hope that he goes to take Teon Kennedy out. I hope that he realizes that if he wants to make the money, if he wants to build that fan base, he's got to make exciting fights. I'm not sure if that's going to happen this Saturday on HBO. I don't know. So I'm going to pick Rigondeaux, and I think it's going to go to a decision. We'll see what Kennedy can do. Maybe Kennedy will surprise me. And there are times, every once in a while, when you get two technicians in the ring, that they throw caution to the wind and they just turn it into a slugfest. I really hope that this is one of those fights that this will happen, but I'm not sure. Now, next up, we have a fight for the Bantamweight Championship between Jorge Arce and Jesús Rojas. Now, we got Jorge Arce representing Mexico and Jesús Rojas representing Puerto Rico. And I think that's about the only interesting thing in terms of building up to this fight that I can think of. Jorge Arce, most people know, for those of you who don't, he is a brawler, an all-out, just blood and guts kind of Mexican fighter. He's got a big following in Mexico. He's a very popular guy. He's been in a lot of fights. He's, I think, been in 70 or more fights than that. And lots of times, well, not lots of times, most of the time, it's not a Jorge Arce fight unless he gets bloodied up. And usually he gets bloodied up, and usually he wins. Now, across the ring from him, you have the Puerto Rican fighter, Jesús Rojas, and I don't know much about him. I looked at his record. He's got 20 fights under his belt, but only 10 of those have been against guys that have winning records. That says a lot about a guy. If you've had 20 fights and you've only fought against 10 guys who have winning records, that says something about your level of opposition. It also says about something about you as a fighter. I think that Jorge Arce should outclass Rojas. I think for as long as it lasts, it might be a fun fight depending on what Rojas brings into the ring. Now, Rojas is going to be a younger guy. You got the Mexico-Puerto Rico rivalry thing happening in this fight. Honestly, I haven't seen Rojas fight. His last fight, which was against a winning fighter, was a unanimous decision. And before that, he fought a guy that was like 8-6-1. So I think that Rojas is brought in to be an opponent. Well, I'm pretty sure he has. And we'll see what Rojas can bring into the ring. Sometimes these things turn out into good fights. I think you're beginning to see the trend now. Usually what happens with pay-per-view fights is that they front load the card, which means the main event is going to be the best fight of the night, or they hope it's going to be the best fight of the night, and they spend so much money on paying the main event fighters that they don't have a lot of money left to pay the undercard fighters. In this case, you're going to see two guys that are good, Rigondeaux and another guy, Jorge Arce, who actually is an exciting fighter, but against opponents that are kind of question marks, so you don't know, because it takes two to make a good fight. I don't know what's going to happen, but these guys are unknown. Well, Kennedy, not so much unknown. He's a prospect. We'll see what happens. So let's go on to our next fight, where we have two actually guys who are known. We have Mike Jones versus Randall Bailey. So let's start with Randall Bailey. Bailey is a guy who is a veteran, and he did most of his campaigning. He spent most of his career at the junior welterweight division, and he is he's moved up to welterweight recently, but he hasn't had as many fights in the welterweight division as Mike Jones. And the last time you saw Jones, he was in Madison Square Garden on the Cotto Margarito 2 undercard at Madison Square Garden, and he fought Sebastian Luan, and I was there, I witnessed the fight. It didn't seem like Luan was really in there to win the fight. I thought he came to survive, and Jones won the decision. Before that fight, Jones had two fights against Jesús Soto-Carras. The first one, which was a back and forth kind of bloody war. Jones is a competent welterweight. Whether he's reached his ceiling or not, we'll see. He's a tall welterweight. He seems to do most things okay. He's a good fighter. And in Bailey, he's fighting a guy that has a really strong right hand. Bailey now, like I said, he's moved up to welterweight. Again, up against the welterweight, he's knocked out one guy at welterweight. His other fights at welterweight have been decisions. And then you had that really weird fight that happened in 2010 where he went down to Argentina. He went to fight a guy named Saeed Ouali. And in the second round of that fight, Bailey lifted Ouali and put him on a ring post. Ouali fell off the ring post, and it ended up being a second round no decision because Ouali fell off the ring post and hurt himself in one of the more bizarre endings in a boxing match. Now that was in 2010. Since then, Bailey's only fought once in 2011 in September. He won a unanimous decision, but so he's not the most busy guy. In this fight, I expect that Jones will outbox Randall Bailey. Randall Bailey has been knocked out before. When he fought Urango at junior welterweight, he got TKO'd. Maybe Jones can take him out. Maybe he won't. Bailey has that powerful right hand. He's one of the most powerful boxers in the ring today. So I think that Jones is going to outbox him though, unless Bailey can land one of those right hands. I'm not sure that he can keep Jones off of him. So that sets us up for the main event. We've got Manny Pacquiao versus Timothy Bradley. Now, for those of you who don't know who Timothy Bradley is, hopefully you've caught some of the 24/7. Hopefully you've read some of the stuff on badlefttalk.com, one of my favorite boxing blogs out there. Now, Timothy Bradley, he's a young fighter. He's 28 years old. He's 28. He's got 28 victories, 0 defeats, and he's got 1 draw. Now, what to say about Bradley? He is what he is. He's not a guy that has a lot of celebrity around him. He's not gonna, he doesn't have a big entourage. He's a guy who is just a boxer, and he's been boxing for a while now. For a guy who's for a young fighter, he's got a lot of fights, and he has an old fighter style. When I say that, I mean that he's a very crafty boxer. He doesn't do one thing particularly really well. He's not the most powerful boxer. He's not the most powerful puncher, but he does a lot of things okay. And he does not just okay, he does a lot of things good. And he's a very crafty guy. He's not afraid to get in there and dirty it up a little bit, and he's seen a lot of styles. He's seen slick fighters, he's seen guys with a lot of power, And so far, he's done a good job of adjusting and beating a lot of fighters. And that's a testament to the shape that he always comes into the ring as. He's not going to come into the ring out of shape. Timothy Bradley has one of the most chiseled bodies that you'll see in boxing. His abs are just insane, and it's because he's a gym rat. He trains out of in Nevada, and he's either training or he's tending to his family, and that's who he is. And I liked him. I like Timothy Bradley. I think he's got a lot of charisma. I think he's a really good young fighter. And he made his bones at junior welterweight. He beat guys like Kendall Holt. Actually, first he lifted the belt from Junior Witter. He went overseas to England and fought him over there and lifted the belt there, which you have to give a guy a lot of credit for, especially a young fighter going overseas to fight a guy. He was supposed to be the opponent, but he scored the upset, took the belt from Junior Witter, and then defended the belt. Actually took Kendall Holt's belt, which in a good fight where he got knocked down, got off the canvas, and won the rest of that fight. He also beat Lamont Peterson, who recently beat Amir Khan, but that fight, the result of that fight is controversial because Lamont Peterson got busted for steroids before the second fight, the rematch with Khan, and admitted that he took steroids before the first fight with Khan. So he beat Lamont Peterson, who beat Amir Khan, allegedly, and then he went out and he fought the other guy that a lot of people considered the number one guy in the junior welterweight division, Devon Alexandra. And that fight happened in Michigan, and it was disappointing in terms of the size of the crowd, and also disappointing in terms of the action over the fight. But certainly, I don't think that that's Timothy Bradley's fault. Look, nobody's going to look good against Timothy Bradley. He's just a rugged fighter. He's going to kind of mess with your timing. He's going to get inside. He's going to rough you up. He's going to take away the things that you do well, and he's going to make you look bad. Now, on the other side of the fight, you got the main draw. You got Manny Pacquiao. Now, the last time we saw Manny Pacquiao, he escaped the third fight with Juan Manuel Marquez with the razor-thin, the narrowest of decision. There were a lot of people who thought Juan Manuel Marquez actually won that fight. And Pacquiao came out of the ring. He didn't make any excuses, but later on, they said his calves, his legs, that they haven't felt right, that he's got pains in his calves, which is why he hasn't been the same explosive Manny Pacquiao that he was when he fought Ricky Hatton, when he fought Miguel Cotto, when he fought Margarito, when he fought De La Hoya. And certainly, that could be it. It could also be that Pacquiao's getting older. Also, Pacquiao, as you know, he's got a lot of extracurriculars that he does outside of the ring. Before this fight, though, he seems like he's kind of gone or experienced some kind of awakening. He's doing Bible study now. He sold his chicken farm where he had all the cockfights. He's not gambling anymore. Also, it was reported that before the fight with Juan Manuel Marquez, he actually only got to the dressing room and only had 10 minutes to warm up before going out to fight Juan Manuel Marquez because he was having marital problems with his wife. So it seems like he's gone through all these changes. It's not like the usual, Manny Pacquiao was changed. This seems to be legit in terms of what he's doing with his life. Now, is that going to help him in the ring against Tim Bradley? I don't know. That's not going to fix his legs. It's certainly not going to make him any younger. But maybe that means less distractions for Pacquiao. Maybe that means more focus. Maybe that means we're going to see Manny Pacquiao that we saw when he fought Ricky Hatton or when he fought Miguel Cotto. Now, the difference is that he's fighting a guy, and Timothy Bradley, I think, is better than Ricky Hatton was when he fought Manny Pacquiao. Now, Pacquiao we're going to see what he has left. We're going to see whether he can really deal with the pressure that Tim Bradley is going to bring. Whether he's going to be able to keep Bradley from taking the fight into deeper rounds like Bradley intends to do, or if Tim Bradley wants to take the fight into deeper rounds, or whether Pacquiao can deal with taking the fight into deeper rounds. Some people think that maybe that Pacquiao has fallen off maybe a little bit more than other people maybe more than other people think. Maybe Pacquiao is at the tail end of his career. His own promoter, Bout Arum, says, you know, Pacquiao loses this fight. I don't know if he should continue boxing. He says that this is a 50-50 fight now. He could be saying that because he wants to sell tickets and he wants to sell that this fight is really competitive. Now, I'm going to say most people, like me, favor Manny Pacquiao and think that he is just still too talented and too fast and brings too much to the ring for a guy like Tim Bradley to beat him, but you never know. Tim Bradley is a very loud underdog in this fight. That having been said, I think Pacquiao is just a little bit too much for Bradley, but there's no saying, there's no telling which Manny Pacquiao is going to show up, because if the Manny Pacquiao that showed up to fight Juan Manuel Marquez last November shows up to fight Tim Bradley this year, I think Bradley can take this fight. And Bradley is the hungry fighter. He's the younger fighter, and in a lot of ways, Bradley is as place where Manny Pacquiao was years ago when he was the younger fighter, when he was the guy that was looking to take on the competition, when he was the guy looking to win the belts, to win that recognition. That's the spot that Tim Bradley occupies. And I really like him as a fighter. I think he's certainly the future of boxing, one of the pieces of the future of boxing. And he's a guy, he seems like a good guy. And I hope that we get to see more of Tim Bradley, whether he wins or loses this fight. Now, Manny Pacquiao, like I said, he's at the tail end of his career, and of course, everybody is gonna wonder whether he wins or loses, but especially if Manny Pacquiao wins. Who is he gonna fight next? And they're gonna bring up the question of the Mayweather fight. I've made my opinion known about this fight. Like I said, I don't think it's ever gonna happen. I think with Mayweather and with Pacquiao, you have two fighters who, not even two fighters, you have two millionaires who think that they are the best, and nobody is willing to cede anything to the other person. It seems as though with everything that Pacquiao is saying, he's willing to do 50-50 with Mayweather, but Mayweather wants to do 60-40 with Pacquiao and won't do anything less than that. And Pacquiao, because he thinks he's the best, won't do anything less than 50-50. And that right there is why you'll never see the fight, because they won't do 50-50. That's how I feel about the fight. Now, before I end the show, I have two sad notes. One is about the passing of Johnny Tapia. He was a terrific Mexican boxer who entertained a lot of guys, and he had a lot of issues outside of the ring. He had a lot of personal demons that he dealt with, substance abuse, maybe some mental illness too. Unfortunately, he seems to have taken his own life. And our condolences go out to Johnny Tapia. Rest in peace. You gave us a lot of good fights. I hope that Mr. Tapia finds peace in death that he never found while he was alive. And also I'd like to mention Paul Williams, who seemed like he was all set to make another big fight. He was gonna fight Canelo Alvarez in September, and till he was involved in a car accident. He was on a motorcycle, he was hit by a car, or he swerved to not hit a car, and he ended up paralyzed from the waist down. Again, my thoughts are with Paul Williams and his family. He is a fighter who, whether you enjoyed him or not, he took on fights. He didn't duck anybody, and in fact, there was a time when he was the most ducked fighter in boxing, but he took on fighters and he made exciting fights, partially because he was a guy who was tall but never really fought like he was tall. He liked to mix it up on the inside. Sometimes he paid for it, a lot of times he made other guys pay for it, and I think that's to be commended. He's a guy who did a lot with what he had, certainly, and we're going to miss Paul Williams as a boxer, and I hope that as a person, I hope this isn't the last that we've seen of Paul Williams. I hope he recovers well, and I hope that he leads a happy and successful life. Thank you for watching FCNYC. Manny Pacquiao versus Tim Bradley on HBO pay-per-view this Saturday on HBO. Tune in. Take care.